What is going on YouTube and Diablo 4 fans? It's Lanfear here from Lanfear's Diablo 4. Welcome back to the channel. So in today's video we are going to be doing another theory craft and build guide video. And what I want to do in today's video is look at a build that I've been theory crafting over the last couple days. Excuse me. And that is a lightning landslide druid. So that would be using the lightning storm skill as well as the landslide skill. So the reason for this build and why I've been theory crafting it is one of my end game ideas for the druid is to do a full landslide build, but I have a fear that its AoE or area of effect damage may be a little lackluster or lacking a bit. So in an endeavor to try and incorporate some AoE damage into the build, this is what I've come up with. So having a look at our skill tree here, this is what I am thinking. So we'll put 1 point into wind shear, and this is a projectile that pierces, and with its enhancements it also has a chance to make enemies vulnerable, as well as grant 3 additional spirit with each enemy that's hit beyond the first one. So hopefully this will be generating a lot of spirit for us. In the beginning you could run the other enhancement, which would make it that you gain increased movement speed, which I think for leveling would be good, but in the end I think more spirit generation is what we'd be looking at. And because we want to stay ranged with this build, I don't think Storm Strike would be ideal for it. So that's why we are going with Wind Shear. So moving on to our core skills and the idea behind this build, what I want to do is basically for all your trash mobs and your big groups of enemies and monsters, I want to be using Lightning Storm to take care of all those smaller, lesser enemies and the trash, so to speak, and then using Landslide to take on the elites and the bosses and those sorts of things. So yes, you may be splitting your power a bit between 2 different skills, but I think together they could potentially work quite nicely. So we'll max out our ranks in Lightning Storm to rank 5, and this basically we will channel to grow a lightning storm that will strike down with lightning on enemies. Then with our enhancements for this, we are going to do enhanced lightning storm, which means the size of our lightning storm is preserved for 4 seconds after we channel it. So this is a channeling skill, and basically once we channel it for 4 seconds afterwards, it will carry on damaging enemies. Then next we will look at getting the enhancement, which is Primal Lightning Storm, which has an 8% chance to immobilize enemies for 3 seconds, which will help with our crowd control as well as dealing more damage. Then looking at Landslide, we'll put 5 ranks into Landslide, and this, like we covered in the Landslide build video that I did recently, will crush enemies between 2 pillars of earth. Then we'll take the enhanced Landslide, which after it damages enemies 4 times, the next hit will immobilize them for 3 seconds, so again adding another source of crowd control and immobilize. And then looking specifically at getting to Primal Landslide, which will create terror motes. When our enemies are immobilized, it will give us a stack of terror motes, which will guarantee critical strikes of our next Landslide, and we will be immobilizing a lot using Landslide, possibly getting some from Lightning Storm, and then also our Poison Creeper here. So the idea is to kill all the trash with Lightning Storm, a big AoE skill, and then on the elites and bosses use Landslide. So with this, you won't pick these passives up right in the beginning, but when you have points, you'll put them into here. So we don't really need maximum spirits, we're just going to put 1 point into Heart of the Wild, so that we can put 3 points into Abundance to get us 18% more spirit from our Wind Shear, which also already has this enhancement to give us extra spirit. Then we will also put it into Wild Impulses when our spirit generation and management is at a good level. Then we'll get 9% extra spirit cost on our core skills, being Landslide and Lightning Storm, but we will also deal 15% enhanced damage. So those passives you will pick up when you have a chance. Then moving on to the defensive skills for this build, staying with the whole storm theme, we are going to be going with Cyclone Armor. So what this will do will give us a passive of 10% non-physical damage reduction, and then when we activate it, it will act as a CC and knock back enemies as well as damage them. And the theme of this build is to generally play more on the storm side for the AoE kind of gameplay instead of the single target gameplay that Landslide focuses on specifically. So we will pick up the enhancements for this, which would mean that when enemies are knocked back by Cyclone Armor, they are slowed for 70% for 2 seconds, so that's some more CC for us. And then finally, every 10 seconds, Cyclone Armor will intensify and it will grant us 30% damage reduction for 2 seconds. So that is a nice defensive buff for us there as well. Then, just looking at this node off of the skill tree, we will just put 1 into this, as this is our extra point left over once we've maxed out everything that we want to in this build. So this will increase our non-physical resistances by 5% by putting 1 point into Ancestral Fortitude. So looking at our companion node of the skill tree, we are going to be putting 1 into Poison Creeper, which will periodically poison enemies, but then importantly when we activate it, it will immobilize in an area of effect, and that will immobilize a bunch of enemies, which will give us more Terramote stacks for our Landslide to do its single target damage, as well as just give us some extra CC and work around that whole theme of immobilizing. So we will pick up the Enhanced Poison Creeper, and that means our immobilized duration is increased, and then also our Brutal Poison Creeper, which means our critical strike chance is increased 20% against enemies that we have activated our Poison Creeper on and immobilized them. So that will give us a much better critical strike chance, which is also important for this build. Then we will also do Nature's Reach to get some extra range damage on our Lightning Storm and our Landslide, and that is just 3 ranks into that. And again, this revolves around immobilized, stunned, slowed, or knocked back, so basically CC'd enemies. And like I've shown you so far, we are going to be doing a lot of CC with this build, so that will give us this bonus quite often. Then moving on to our rat skills here, we're basically picking up these storm-based passives, which are quite powerful and I think will improve our Lightning Storm quite a bit. So we're just putting 1 point into Elemental Exposure, which is more of a chance for our storm skills to make enemies vulnerable. 1 point into Charged Atmosphere, which means that every 18 seconds a lightning bolt hits a nearby enemy, dealing 45% damage, and that is so that we can get to Electric Shock, which means that when we are dealing lightning damage with our storm skills, it has up to a 15% chance to again immobilize them for 3 seconds, and if they are already immobilized through all of our various immobilized skills that we've shown so far, they will then take an extra 15% damage instead if they are already immobilized. So that's a powerful skill for this build in particular. And we are putting 3 ranks into that, not just the 1 in these prerequisites. And then we are also putting 3 ranks into Bad Omen, which means on a lucky hit we have up to a 30% chance when dealing damage to a vulnerable or again immobilized or stunned enemy that a lightning bolt also hits again, dealing 55% damage. So that's added damage on top of all of our immobilized attacks again. So then for our mobility and our unstoppable, so our CC break, we are going to be using Trample, which is just an all-round general great utility skill and can also be used for single target damage as well. And then with that we'll be picking up the Enhanced Trample for that extra damage, and then Savage Trample, which will also give us more spirit, which will aid us in our spirit management for this build. Moving on to our ultimate node of the skill tree, there aren't any ultimates in this build with all the other skills that we picked that I find would be really powerful or beneficial to the build. So instead, we are pumping all the points we can into these elemental or nature skill passive nodes that give us greatly increased damage and utility. So our first 3 points here will be into Defiance, which means we deal 12% increased damage to elites with our nature skills. So we will be putting 3 ranks into Natural Disaster, which means that our Earth skills deal 20% increased damage to vulnerable enemies, and vulnerable will get a lot from our basic attack, and then our Storm skills deal 12% increased damage when enemies are knocked back, stunned, or immobilized, which we'll be doing all the time as well. So we have a 12% damage buff on all of our core skills. Then looking here at Resonance, when we cast a nature spell of the Storm type, then we will get 6% enhanced damage, but then if it's followed up by an Earth skill, that will be tripled to 18% damage. So what we'll do is basically switch between our Lightning Storm and our Landslide, and then getting 18% increased damage when we alternate between those. So that is this node of the skill tree, and this Resonance passive is really powerful for this build. So next, Circle of Life, we will basically be gaining 3% life for any of our spirit costing skills that are nature magic. So this should also hopefully keep our life topped up with this build. Then lastly, looking at our key passives here, we are going to be using Nature's Fury, and this means that when we cast the Earth skill, it has a 20% chance to trigger a free Storm skill of the same category, so that would be our core skills. And in addition, when we cast a Storm skill, it has a 20% chance to trigger an Earth skill of the same category. So as we are spamming our Lightning Storm and our Landslides, they should in turn, with a 20% chance, also be spamming other skills of those opposite types. So I think we're going to have a lot of skills popping off using this passive, and you could maybe do Perfect Storm, or if you get the particular aspect, I can't remember the name right now, you could use Earthen Might, but I actually think that Nature's Fury might just be one of the key elements to making this build successful, and I'm very excited to try out this passive with the build and see what it does for it. I think it will probably be the best passive choice. So, summing that up, that is our overview of the skill tree here. We will be generating our Fury with Wind Shear, then popping off our Lightning Storm against all the trash mobs, using our Landslide and Terror modes through immobilized enemies to do our single target damage to elites and bosses. Our Cyclone Armor will be our defensive skill and also playing into the Storm theme of the build. Then our Poison Creeper will be providing a big AoE immobilize. Our other passive nodes will be increasing our damage, and Trample will be our utility with no ultimate skill being used. So that wraps up our skill tree. We'll now move on to the aspects that we'll be using here. So starting at the top, we're going to use Aspect of Cyclonic Force, and this aspect is really cool in that it also provides physical damage reduction on top of the non-physical damage reduction that Cyclone provides us, and in addition, it will also be applied to all of our nearby allies. So for group play, this is a super powerful Druid specific aspect, so I'm really excited to use that one. Then moving on, we'll use Aspect of Might, and this means that basic skills will grant us 20% damage reduction for 2 to 6 seconds, and we're going to be spamming our basic skill Wind Shear to get as much spirit generation as we can so that we can spam our core skills. So this will give us a nice flat 20% damage reduction that we should have up all the time. Then next we are looking at the Ruin Worker's Conduit aspect, which means that critical strikes with storm skills that we cast charge the air around us for 1 to 2 seconds, causing a lightning bolt to periodically hit an enemy in the area for X lightning damage, and this duration can be extended by additional critical strikes. So hopefully this will be adding another element of lightning damage into our build as well. Then moving on to the pants, we're going to be using Aspect of Disobedience, and this will give us 0.25 to 0.5% increase armor for 4 seconds when we deal any form of damage, stacking up to 25 to 50%. So this should give us a nice big armor and defensive buff. I think maybe just using Cyclone Armor, not using Earthen Bulwark, would mean picking up some of these defensive aspects could be very useful to this build. Then Ghost Walker aspect for the boots, so that when we are unstoppable and for 4 seconds afterwards, so that would be from our trample skill, we will then move freely through enemies and have 10 to 25% increased movement speed, so just a general good utility from that skill. For our weapon, Edge Masters aspect, and this means that skills deal 10 to 20% increased damage based on our available primary resource when cast, so receiving the maximum benefit when you have full primary resource. So maybe when you are tackling the elites or the single target bosses and things like that with your Landslide, then this should be a primary resource if you've been managing it correctly, and this should deal at least a good chunk more damage on top of that. Then moving on here, we are looking at the aspect of Inner Calm, and because Lightning Storm is a channeled core skill, we will be dealing 5 to 10% increased damage for each second that you stand still whilst we are channeling, up to 30%. So this should give us a good buff on our Lightning Storm's damage for that AoE damage in the build. Next is the overcharge aspects, which means that lucky hits up to 10 to 20% or have a 10 to 20% chance when dealing lightning damage to overload the target for 3 seconds, causing any direct damage we deal to them to pulse for additional damage to surrounding enemies, so adding another layer and element of extra AoE on top of our Lightning Storm through the overcharge aspect. Then Lightning Dance's aspect next is Lightning Storm critical strikes spawn 3 dancing bolts that seek out enemies in an area dealing lightning damage. So again, adding on top of that another layer of extra lightning damage on our Lightning Storm. And last but not least is the aspect of the Expectant, and this means that attacking enemies with a basic skill increases the damage of your next core skill by 5 to 10% up to 30%. So we will always be switching between using our Wind Shear to generate Spirit to using our core skills, and that means that we should have this 30% damage buff on our core skills up most of the time. So those are the aspects that we're using for this build, and I think that generally they are focused on the Lightning Storm skill, the core skill, and that is sort of what I'm focusing on with the build. Is the general idea is to be able to clear any sort of instance and variations of mobs, being single target or AoE, and focusing more on the AoE aspect of things. So generally with this build you want to be kitey and hang back and not get into melee range and just blast things apart with your Lightning Storm. And I think that these aspects play in well with boosting our Lightning Storm damage and then still having our Terror Motes and our Landslide for those single targets. So moving along here to the end of the video, we are going to be having our Landslide core skill, Poison Creeper, Trample, Cyclone Armor, Wind Shear, and Lightning Storm. So those would be our 6 skills that we are using. Then going on to the Spirit Boons for this build, it's sort of like no-brainers in my opinion, but for the Deer, we are going for the 10% in reduced damage from elites, which I think out of all the options you get here, this one will be picked most of the time. And then moving on to the Eagle Boon, we will be using Avian Wrath, which means we gain 30% critical strike damage, and this is just to boost the damage on our crits. And we could do the 5% increased critical strike chance or the 30% critical strike damage. I don't think either of these are what we are going to be needing, so it would be one of these two. So then for the Wolf Boons, we will be doing Energize, which means lucky hits or on a lucky hit, dealing damage has a 15% chance to restore 10 spirits. So hopefully this will really round out our spirit management in addition to some of the Paragon points that we use, and this should really keep our spirit topped up really nicely. So we are going to favorite the snake boons for this build, and what we're going to be putting is the obsidian slam, which every 10th kill will cause our next earth skill to overpower. So again, that single target damage with our landslide is going to be supercharged by this obsidian slam and really be able to deal massive single target damage. Then to boost our lightning storm, we are going to be doing overload, which means on a lucky hit, dealing lightning damage has a 20% chance to cause the target to emit a static discharge, dealing 20% lightning damage to surrounding enemies. So again, on top of some of the other aspects that we had, this will be adding another layer of extra lightning damage from our lightning storm over and above everything else that we have. So I think that's a fantastic boon for this build. So wrapping it up, that is my theory craft and idea for a build for the lightning landslide druid. And I think that this build will be very cool for early game, mid game, and into the end game. And then I think we are just going to have to test it and see properly how powerful it will be in the late end game. I think up until the end game, so maybe your world tier 4, like the beginning of World Tier 4 and after World Tier 3, this should still be a very viable and powerful build. And then towards the end, you might want to shift and focus a bit differently. But I think in general, this is a build that focuses on providing you the best of both worlds in terms of single target damage and area of effect damage, and using the lightning storm and landslide skills to their maximum potential. So I haven't seen many builds that have combined both of these core skills, and this is something that I've just been playing with, as I might possibly spec once the game launches into a pure landslide build. But if I find the AoE lacking a bit, then I think that this lightning landslide druid could really be a viable option. So I hope this has provided some insights, and maybe you're keen to give the build a try, and I hope that you enjoyed the video. And if you did, please consider subscribing to the channel, and any views, likes and shares are always greatly appreciated. And Diablo 4 launch is coming up extremely soon now, so we hope to see you guys all in Sanctuary very, very soon. Until then, cheers.